Hello everyone, I'm Pacific the Casual Gamer, and today I would like to talk about what makes Rook different in a 5-stack and a solo queue. So Rook has been in the game since the beginning. I think technically out of all the operators I played, I have the most hours on Rook. So I'm technically still a Rook main after all of these years, although I don't use him very much anymore because I found a lot of other defenders more fun. But today I'd like to talk about Rook and the differences in 5-stack versus solo queuing. Now solo queue, we all know about it. There are two forms of Rook when it comes to solo queue. The anchor that will not, it refuses to leave sight. Or the guy who goes in spawn peaks and does the most heaviest roam with the most heaviest character other than Montang in the entire freaking game. Okay? Those are the two forms of Rook and solo queue. And if I'm going to be honest, they work in solo queue. Rook roaming is terrifying. Okay? Because you have an ACOG and you have heavy armor. You have the MP5, which is a weak gun, doesn't have a lot of, fire rate, but it's just super easy to control. And then when you're anchoring, you have an ACOG, and you have that extra armor that every teammate has, so you're going to be, downing people more instead of just killing them. And if you get really good at anchoring, Rook becomes that kind of flexible anchor type guy. Now, we all know how he works in solo queue. But what I really want to focus on in this video is the 5-stack aspect of Rook, because I think the 5-stack aspect takes Rook and actually adds a lot of value to him. Now, Rook isn't my first choice of defender in any lineup, I would say, unless someone's doing really good and there's, for some reason, a need for an ACOG. Maybe you're using a specific set of angles and echoes band, and those angles will do better with a machine gun than the TCSG or the 44 Magnum or the Boss G. So in that case, you bring the Rook or the Doc. And what I find I do most of the time in Rook in a 5-stack is I anchor more often than roam. I don't ever roam as Rook in a 5-stack. But I also have a lot of intel. So with Rook, I can be a more aggressive anchor. I don't have to sit in the back of sight, snipe people. I don't have to go spawn peek because you don't want to do that. I can sit in sight and I can properly anchor with Rook, because even though I'm slow, I'm gathering intel, I'm able to make refrags, I'm able to snipe people, and overall you can hold longer angles. I'm also on cams as Rook, because when you're anchoring, 90% of the time, unless someone uses a Maru or runs into sight, you're not really going to be needed in the first phase of firefights. So, when I bring a Rook, I sit on cams in the beginning of the game and give intel for the roamers, right? Now, what's really beneficial about Rook with his armor is that the roamers are able to waste more time because they're able to take, most of the time, if they're a 3-speed, one more bullet from a gun, right? And that one bullet can make a difference, okay? Now, with Rook, he has impact grenades and he has the proximities. I think he has proximities. Yeah. So with Rook, with the proximities, you're going to use those a lot more if you decide to use them with Rook in more interesting spots, right? So with proximity mines, you're not just going to chuck them into a couple doorways. You're going to be like, all right, there's two guys playing on this side, one guy playing on this side. So this one guy, we're going to give him proximities so that he's, set up. And what that's going to do is that's going to take one flank or maybe two, and you're just going to bolster them that much. That's going to synergize well with the Rook armor, because that's going to allow your roamers to get into one more firefight with intel rather than no intel, which means they're most likely going to get shot less, which means if they do get shot, they're able to take maybe another gunfight because they have the Rook armor. Also with Rook, man, I am extremely flexible as a Rook. I'm a flexible anchor, which basically means if I'm playing a site like Cafe, I stick on one floor. That's what I do, right? I don't go roam. I usually stick to one floor. If I'm playing on a map like Canal, maybe I go down a floor, but most of the time I have long angles I can hold. And that can be extremely powerful, because if you're able to hold longer angles, not only are you able to take gunfights better if you're good with the ACOG, but your team is coordinated enough, they can use less utility over there, right? A great example of this is, let's just say you want to defend one of the bridges on Canal. Let's say the top bridge. And let's say you bring, I don't know, a Goyle and a Jaeger and a something else, right? If you are the ACOG guy, you can sit on that control panel and take gunfights with a lot of accuracy down the sky bridge, right? If you're not, maybe you got to put an ADS and a Goyo shield to distract people, maybe an Ella, right? But Rook, you can throw a proximity there, hold that angle, and you can also pop angles onto square breach, or some people call it pillbox, which means that maybe you don't have to have an extra guy to hold the bandit who's bandit tricking, right? Maybe you can just be the Rook because he's got the ACOG. Things like that mean that less utility gets spent in other places, right? And that armor is really going to be beneficial for that pillbox example because bandit can take one more shot, right? So you're more likely to get refrags and crosses off of the bandit player, which again reinforces the fact that you have to spend less utility. Basically what I'm trying to say, what I've been saying throughout this entire video, I've said it many times, is Rook in a 5-stack with the ACOG, and I mean, you can bring the impacts too if you don't want to bring a shotgun, or the proximity alarms, is wherever you put Rook, wherever he's going to play, he can play a little bit more flexibly in a 5-stack, and you don't have to put as much utility in that spot. And guys, that's all I got to say about Rook in a solo queue versus 5-stack. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Do you use Rook in your 5-stack? I'm kind of curious to see if there's any 5-stacks that still do that. That's old school Siege, man. Little known fact, when Siege first came out, you brought Rook every single time. That's just how it was back then, baby. But I'm Pacific the Casual Gamer. I suck just as bad as you do at video games, and I will see you guys in the next one.